Pro-life response, reaction to the deadly Colorado Springs Planned Parenthood standoff. Message of peace, Pope Francis back home after celebrating Mass in the Central African Republic. Global climate concerns, world leaders take on controversial issues at a Paris conference. And biblical display, a Bible blessed by Pope Francis highlighted at the Library of Congress. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Monday, November 30th, 2015. Good evening from Washington. Thanks for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick with your news now. The man accused of opening fire at a Planned Parenthood clinic in Colorado Springs appears in court today. Robert Louis Deere is accused of killing 3 people during a 5-hour standoff. Catherine Szeltner has the latest tonight.
Brian, those victims include a police officer, an Iraq War veteran, and a mother of 2. Friday's Planned Parenthood shooting also left 9 people in the hospital. Pro-life groups are quick to condemn the attack.
Additional unit, CSPD is working an active shooter. Again, CSPD has an active shooter.
The day after Thanksgiving, Robert Louis Deere is accused of opening fire on the Colorado Springs Planned Parenthood. Gunfire sent people inside racing for cover.
And then I saw a man crawling to the front door, and I saw the glass shatter, and he crawled into the entry.
After 5 hours, Deere surrendered. He's described as a loner who didn't talk much to his neighbors. Law enforcement say Deere mentioned no more baby parts within a rambling statement to authorities. The comment is possibly connected to the recent series of undercover Planned Parenthood videos, which claim the group sells aborted baby parts for profit. One video features the medical director for Planned Parenthood of the Rocky Mountains, where the shooting took place.
They're all attached.
Pro-life groups quickly responded to the attack.
For pro-lifers, we have uniformly condemned this violence, uniformly condemned the violence. This is not what our movement is about. This is a peaceful movement of people who believe in life across the board and that all life is valuable.
The president of Americans United for Life calls for a law and order response with no quick judgments.
We don't actually know yet what the motivation was, and we're only hearing snippets, and it's unconfirmed. And anytime you have rumors like that, you need to wait to hear what is actually going on.
A judge has sealed court documents for Robert Deere, including his arrest warrant. Prosecutors say making them public would jeopardize the ongoing investigation. Brian.
All right, thank you, Catherine Szeltner. Of course, we will have some political analysis on this story a little bit later on. Right now, Dr. David Osteen is Executive Director at the National Right to Life, and Marjorie Dannenfelser is President of the Susan B. Anthony List. There are attempts to link this tragedy to the pro-life movement. How do we counter with the truth here?
Well, I would say, and then I'd like to hear from you, David, that this man worked in direct contradiction to the principles and aims of the pro-life movement. He has nothing to do with the pro-life movement and is a deranged individual true. The person who was acting within the aims and who embodies the pro-life movement is the sheriff Sweeney, who ran in the eye of danger and saved lives that were in the clinic. Even though he disagreed with the principles and aims of Planned Parenthood, that is exactly what any one of us would have done in that situation. That's pro-life.
Yeah. This is totally against everything National Right to Life stands for. We oppose the taking of human life, and we just, with no uncertain terms, condemn this act. This is the act of a lone, crazed individual.
There's a very active legislative agenda right now by the pro-life force. Will this change that agenda in any way?
No, not at all. I mean, the reason we're involved in the pro-life movement is to protect innocent human life. And babies are still dying from abortion. And the pro-life movement will continue to work to save those babies.
Just to emphasize, this changes nothing. It changes nothing that Planned Parenthood has done to facilitate the harvesting of children's brains through their faces, through all of those horrors. And it cannot be that in our civil society, that when something terrible happens, we stop speaking the truth.
That seems so extreme, and it is, and yet Planned Parenthood wants to paint pro-lifers as extremists. How can we be zealous for life without going to extremes?
Well, we approach our issue through love, through prayer, and through telling the truth. We work educationally, legislatively, and yes, politically, but we will continue to do that. But we must speak the truth about what's happening.
That's right, and electing people who will do exactly what David described is what Susan B. Anthony List does, and what we'll be seeing full force, we pray, on the floor of the U.S. Senate in the next few days.
Do you think anything positive can come from this tragedy?
There's nothing good about those persons losing their lives, nothing good at all. We would hope people would learn that the taking of innocent human life is wrong.
Clarity is always helpful. It's good to see what the truth is. One point of clarity is that this incident is a tragedy completely opposite to the aims of the pro-life movement. We can now coalesce around the beauty and the truth and the love of the pro-life movement if there was ever any problem in discerning that at all.
Beautifully put. Marjorie Dannenfelser, Susan B. Anthony List, and Dr. David Osteen with the National Right to Life. Thank you both for being with us.
Thank you, sir.
Other stories our EWTN News Nightly team is covering in today's world. Pope Francis is back home in the Vatican tonight after wrapping up a 6-day visit to Africa. He went to Kenya first, then Uganda. But the most dangerous part of his journey was his final stop. The Central African Republic presented the most concern for the Holy Father's safety. He visited a mosque in a neighborhood of the capital city that is considered particularly dangerous. It is the site of a continued standoff between Muslim and Christian militia. Flanked by Vatican security, UN and French troops, and an undercover detail, the Pope said God is peace, salam, and that those who claim to believe in God must be men and women of peace. Tensions were slightly lifted as Francis finished his Africa trip celebrating an open-air mass. He told the people at the stadium that the sufferings they've experienced are opportunities for a new future, a future that the people of this war-torn country hope will be brighter after the Pope's visit. And while in the Central African Republic over the weekend, Pope Francis joined with young religious inaugurating the Jubilee Year of Mercy. He blessed and opened the Holy Door in the capital's Notre Dame Cathedral on Sunday. The Jubilee Year officially begins December 8th. In his homily at the Mass, the Pope spoke of the Christian vocation to love our enemies. Chad Pecknold is a theology professor at Catholic University of America. What is the significance of opening this Jubilee Year of Mercy outside of Rome?
Yeah, first time outside of Rome that we've seen a pope open up the doors of mercy. Look, the Pope's whole thematic mission is to bring mercy to the peripheries. And so, of course, he's there. There's a door of mercy there. He wants to open the door of mercy, not to initiate the year of mercy, but to say you're part of the whole global church, of the universal church's mission to bring human beings on this journey of repentance, to receive these extraordinary graces from God.
And this mercy extends beyond the Catholic faith, beyond the Christian faith. He went to a Muslim community there. The significance of that?
Yeah, well, I think this is the Pope John Paul II did this, and so did Pope Benedict, went to express a certain solidarity with Muslims who, of course, also seek God and seek the face of God. He wants, I think, to distinguish in these trying times the difference between dialogue with peaceful Muslims and those who are seeking to achieve their ends through violence. And so this is an effort at peacemaking, and I think we can see much of his trip as an effort at being resistant to evil and seeking the good. And this is a common good endeavor in which we recognize that we have things to do which we have in common with our brothers and sisters all around the world, and that includes our Muslim brothers and sisters as well.
Pope Francis travels a lot,
yeah.
But there's deep significance to this trip to Africa, is there not?
I think so. I mean, if you think about the trip to Africa as symbolic of his entire thematic of mercy to the peripheries, and contrast that with the whole controversy around the synod with Germany. And, Germany sends money and doctrinal excuses, but Africa's a church for the poor. And he expresses his solidarity with the poor, with those who show joy, the joy of the gospel, the simplicity, the authenticity of the gospel. It's interesting that in his addresses to the Africans, it was all about the joy of the gospel.
And he even mentioned bananas.
He even mentioned bananas because the banana was resistant to evil. It was resistant to those things which would cause harm to the church, and it was always seeking to provide nourishment, and that the Christians should provide nourishment and be resistant to evil. And here at the same time, we've got Cardinal Sarah in Rome, and Cardinal Sarah is being praised in Rome for his prophetic witness to marriage and the family and the gospel, at the same time as the Pope is in Africa, praising the Africans for their commitment to the same.
How significant. Chad Pecknold from CUA. Thanks for being with us, Dr. Pecknold.
Thanks for having me.
Well, world leaders, including President Obama, meet in Paris today discussing climate change. The summit comes on the heels of the recent terrorist attacks in France. Wyatt Goolsbee reports.
Political momentum like this may not come again.
Over 150 world leaders gathered in Paris on Monday to discuss an issue that impacts everyone, global climate change. The Conference of Parties, or COP21, is an annual forum with the goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions worldwide. In his speech, President Obama said the U.S. is prepared to act, but also stressed that this must be a global effort.
The United States of America not only recognizes our role in creating this problem, we embrace our responsibility to do something about it.
Obama also aimed to ease concerns from critics who say that reducing carbon emissions will lead to a slower economy.
We've proved that strong economic growth and a safer environment no longer have to conflict with one another. They can work in concert with one another.
The Paris summit comes just 17 days after a major ISIS terrorist attack that took the lives of 130 people. The summit began with a moment of silence to honor the victims. Later, President Obama and Russian President Vladimir Putin met to discuss the situation in Syria and the overall strategy for dealing with ISIS. The president argued today's summit is a rejection of what ISIS stands for.
And we salute the people of Paris for insisting this crucial conference go on.
Wyatt Goolsbee, EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you, Wyatt. Jury selection begins in Baltimore for Officer William Porter. He's the first of 6 police officers to be tried in the death of Freddie Gray. Prosecutors charged the officers in September. Despite several defense attorneys' efforts to move the trial to another jurisdiction, the cases will move forward in Baltimore. Gray died in police custody in April, setting off a series of protests and eventually riots. A judge sets bond at $1.5 million for the white Chicago police officer accused of fatally shooting a black teenager 16 times. Officer Jason Van Dyke has been jailed since Tuesday, charged with first-degree murder. Police released dash cam video showing 17-year-old Laquan McDonald, armed with a small knife, being shot repeatedly. Protesters have marched on Chicago's streets since the video's release. The largest protest was on Michigan Avenue, blocking access to big-name Magnificent Mile retailers on Black Friday, the busiest shopping day of the year. The Federal Reserve ends a loan program to companies deemed too big to fail. The Fed adopted a new rule today, banning emergency loans to failing companies. It formalizes a policy central to congressional reform efforts in the wake of the financial crisis of the late 2000s. Rather than providing loans to companies, the Fed will lend to a program or facility where the loan would aid at least 5 firms or entities. Coming up, reaction from the campaign trail to the Colorado Springs Planned Parenthood shooting. And the Library of Congress features a Bible blessed by Pope Francis as visitors learn about the art of hand copying manuscripts. Christians and Muslims are brothers and sisters, and we must act as such. A tweet from Pope Francis after visiting a Muslim community in the Central African Republic. Thank you for joining us this Monday evening. I'm Brian Patrick. The Vatican trial over leaked documents continues today, with one of the 5 defendants changing attorneys. Today, the head of the tribunal announced that Francesca Ciauqui is replacing her court-appointed attorney. That pushes back the hearing until next Monday. 2 former members of the Pope's Financial Reforms Commission, an assistant, and 2 journalists are accused of releasing and publishing confidential documents. A number of presidential candidates outspoken against Planned Parenthood condemn the shootings at the Colorado Springs facility. Dr. Ben Carson called the attack, quote, an act of extreme hatred and violence. He called for an examination of the real issues.
Let's get away from the rhetoric and talk about the real problem. The real problem is that we have become coarse and hateful toward each other.
The president responded with a statement saying, we have to do something about the easy accessibility of weapons. Mike Lillis, a reporter for The Hill, is here with political analysis. So now there are calls for House Speaker Ryan to drop these investigations of Planned Parenthood. Do you think that's going to happen?
I don't think it'll happen. One reason is procedural. Paul Ryan came in as the new speaker saying he's going to work from the bottom up. Committees are going to have free reign. He's a former committee head, and he's going to let them go do their thing. The other is political. The Republicans have gone after Planned Parenthood for a number of years. It's going to be a big part of the spending bill. They're going to want to defund it to the extent that some conservatives are saying we should shut down the government over it. That's not going to happen. They're not going to get that past the White House just because Obama would never sign such a thing. So the fallback will be, hey, we have the power to investigate this. We can, we will, and that will continue because we're not going to be able to defund the group.
Won't this also fuel the debate over gun control again?
Well, sure. You just saw President Obama said, easy accessibility is the big problem. He's called on Congress to act time after time after time. That won't happen either, but you can expect that to be a part of this spending debate as well. We've already seen all the statements from a number of Democrats. They've got the bills ready, tougher background checks, ban on assault weapons, these types of things. The legislation's all there. They will be riders to this spending bill. They won't go anywhere with the Republican-controlled Congress, but it does give them, some red meat to the throat of their base.
Switching gears slightly, the government's power to examine phone records in bulk ended on Sunday. This was out of the Patriot Act after 9/11. Right. Do you think that the attacks in France might be changing any public opinion on this, and are there any efforts to reinstate some of that power?
Well, I think not, for a couple different reasons. There tends to be a more tolerance what people will accept after these terrorist attacks happen. The question of privacy versus liberty and all these different things, surveillance. And people are definitely more accepting of the surveillance apparatus in the wake of these attacks. But it's not like the bulk collection just ended and nothing replaced it. They passed a law in June. It was very bipartisan, and they do have the NSA does have a collection system. The phone companies keep it, but they can access it through a court. And everybody thinks that that's just fine. In fact, the sponsors of that bill put out a statement just today saying that this is, even post-Paris, we're happy with this, the president's happy with it, and if you get conservatives, liberals, and President Obama on board, I think there's not going to be any movement on anything.
Rarely happens. Mike Lillis with The Hill. Thanks for being with us, Mike.
Thanks, Brian.
Well, at a time when all books were handwritten, scribes laboriously copied every letter and every line. It's a lost art receiving a new papal blessing, as Jason Calvi reports.
Word by word, a 13th century scribe copied this Bible onto animal skins.
It's very slippery. It's not absorbing the ink. You almost, as they say, you have to kiss the page and leave.
Library of Congress Rare Books Chief Mark Dimunation shows us paintings illuminating these 15th and 16th century prayer books.
Then you have these illuminations which really bring light through the page. When you see them, they carry light up to you through the, so there's an experience you have of looking through these that draws you into the book itself.
The holy books are on display next to a modern Bible Pope Francis blessed when he visited the Capitol in September. St. John's Abbey and University commissioned it. Queen scribe Donald Jackson guided a team using quill and paint from precious metals and minerals.
This Bible blessed by Pope Francis, which represents a revival of a medieval art form, which really died around 1455 with the advent of the printing press and its first book, the Gutenberg Bible.
The Library of Congress houses one of 3 Gutenberg Bibles printed on animal skin, a historic revolution in a time of hand-copied books.
When they're completed, you have just 2 Bibles, whereas when Gutenberg finished, in this shorter span of time, he had 180 Bibles, hence the advantage of printing.
You can check out the old way, a copy of the St. John's Bible, through January 2nd. A lost art discovering a renaissance. At the Library of Congress, Jason Calvi, EWTN News Nightly.
Up next, did shoppers get a jump on Cyber Monday at the expense of retail stores? And Amazon's drone delivery system is yet to get off the ground. Today, November 30th, is the feast of St. Andrew the Apostle, the brother of St. Peter. Andrew was one of the first followers of Jesus. He preached in what is now Turkey. He was crucified on an X-shaped cross in 60 AD. Thanks for joining us this Monday evening. I'm Brian Patrick. Several thousand Catholic educators gathered earlier this month for the Vatican's World Congress on Catholic Education. Joining us by Skype, Dr. Daniel Guernsey, Director of K-12 programs at the Cardinal Newman Society, joining us from Ave Maria, Florida. You took part in that Congress. What's the Pope's general message on Catholic education?
He wanted to make sure that Catholic education remains open to all, especially the poor, and encouraged us, as in typical Pope Francis style, to go out to the outskirts, to create a warm, welcoming environment, to bring everyone in, a radical openness to the student, keeping them at the center of our efforts. But he wanted to make sure Catholic education was open and that it was authentically human and humane.
The Common Core standards that are being implemented in this country, what concerns are there for Catholic education in connection with those?
The document related to this conference and a lot of the discussion really focused on integral education, which is the Catholic expertise. That's what we do. We integrate mind, body, spirit, morality all together. So the Pope in this document were clear on saying we can't just be about college and career. It's about much, much more. It's about creating really authentically human environments where students are exposed to truth, beauty, and goodness, specifically towards a celebration of life and not towards any crass purposes or monetary ends. It's all about authentically forming that person.
Dr. Guernsey, Catholic education has done so much for this country. Many of us have been educated in Catholic schools. Is it possible for Catholic schools to operate in the standards of Common Core and maintain their Catholicity?
It is possible, but it takes a lot of extra effort. We have to embrace our complete heritage as Catholic schools and the integral formation, mind, body, spirit, morality, everything together. If we do that in the spirit of Gravissimum Educationis, the Vatican II document, we'll be fine, because it lays out Catholic education is all about, first and foremost, knowledge of the faith, knowledge of salvation, reproducing students into the image of Christ as virtuous people able to build the church and to act as a leaven in society. We can do that within the Common Core, but we have to be explicit about our Catholic identity and treat the Common Core with great care.
Dr. Daniel Guernsey, thank you for joining us and explaining the conference. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Well, Black Friday is long gone, but the bargains are now online. Today, of course, Cyber Monday. The National Retail Federation says 121 million shoppers are planning to look for bargains online today. But Cyber Monday may have actually got a jump start, perhaps on Friday. In-store Black Friday sales were down this year because more people were shopping online. Eventually, they may not need stores. Amazon unveils a new video pushing its drone delivery system, Prime Air. Amazon promises the drones will deliver packages weighing up to 5 pounds in less than 30 minutes. Amazon has been trying to win public approval for its drone delivery project for several years. The internet retailer still faces regulatory hurdles in the U.S. and in other countries before that thing can get off the ground. You got to admit, though, that is really cool. Until tomorrow, for the EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Brian Patrick. We leave you tonight with moments from the Holy Father's weekend visits to Uganda and the Central African Republic. Good night, and may God bless you.